Well, Andrew, welcome to Equity Mates.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
So we've got to start with Twiggy. We've always known you as Twiggy as long as doing this podcast. Ever since I remember driving a football 2003, early days, I've known you as Twiggy. Where did the nickname come from?
Mate, you couldn't probably tell by this fat lump sitting across from me, but when I was a kid, right, I was skinny as a bean. And, so your mates just say, well, you're too, that crack joke say, Twig's so skinny he's got to run around in the shower to get wet, right? And they said, look, you're way too skinny to be a forest, of course. You're way too skinny to even be a tree. You're skinny enough to be a twig, so we're going to call you Twig.
Nice.
And from there came Twiggy. And I've been Twiggy for the last, don't mention it, mate.
So, Twiggy, you keep yourself busy across Fortescue, Minderoo, Tattarang. You have so much going on. So we want to set up this conversation by trying to understand how you try and balance your time and your focus today. What are your priorities?
Look, I pulled as chair of the Minderoo Foundation. It's one of the biggest foundations now in the world. I think it has an equity base of about 8-9 billion. And that's Fortescue stock largely. And we'll migrate our Fortescue stock over to that over time. But it's got really great leadership there now. It's slimmed down. It's got its goals set. It's got a leadership team locked in a place. And I think where I should put my time is where I can make the biggest difference, where I can be useful. Look, mate, guys, I want to have fun, right? I mean, you've got to have fun too, right? But I also want to be useful. I live by two principles. Be useful, enjoy it, right? And you don't always enjoy it. You don't always enjoy being useful, but just being useful itself is enjoyable. So I'm switching all my focus onto using Fortescue and my profile to push the industrial world where the problem is to go fully green and to just stop all the bullshit around fossil fuel being our reliable friend. That is such rubbish. I mean, there's clever players in there. They're called dictators, fascists, oligarchs who send out bots all over the world, AI-driven bots, to lace up messages saying, you got to stay with oil and gas because, your energy costs are going to go up and your standard of living is going to go down and, oh, my God, save yourself, stick with fossil fuel. It's just rubbish. The cheapest form of energy on earth is renewable. And I'm saying, who put the word net into net zero, right? Who put that confusing little, what the hell does that mean, word into zero? I know who did it, mate. It was the fossil fuel sector jammed it in, right? Otherwise, they weren't going to sign up to anything just because they're cooking the planet. I mean, they had to have a conscience, right? So they jammed this word net in. And now you've got all, not to get techie, right, but the planetary boundaries, which like the oceans, the rivers, the trees, which absorb carbon dioxide, basically about 50% of what we emit gets absorbed by nature. That's breaking down, right? Nature said, well, we can only absorb so much. Funny that, right? You can only drink so much alcohol before it knocks you out. So at the same time, this net zero 2050 crap is driving carbon emissions every year to record levels at an accelerating rate. So we just look at that and say, well, that's failing. That's not working. What's great for energy prices? What's great for energy reliability? What's great for our economy? What's great for our standard of living? What's going to drive up our standard of living by driving down our cost of living? Well, that's renewable energy. And let's just get after it. Let's just stop pulling excuses and get after it, and stop the fossil fuel fear-mongering and replace it. So we call real zero, not net zero. Real zero is simply stopping burning fossil fuels, because there's a beautiful replacement out there. It's called renewable energy, green electricity and green hydrogen. It's a beautiful replacement. Fortescue's doing it now. And we move on from fossil fuel. We move on from that oligarch fascist in the world-driven uncertainty.
So I think there's two sides to this conversation. It's the real zero side, which we want to get to, but let's pause on the net zero side and establish why it's a problem, just so people really understand it. So net zero, for people less familiar with the term, is you can still continue to emit, but you buy carbon offsets to offset that emission. So I guess what's wrong with that? Tell us why that's bullshit.
Yeah, because those credits are sold by spivvy little people in suits who never go near nature.
Yeah.
who do these calculations, like up in the Kimberleys, which is the most beautiful part of Australia, they burn the Kimberleys. They literally fly across the Kimberleys and they drop these incineration bombs across the Kimberleys. You think, what the hell are they doing that for? I grew up here, mate. I know how stupid it is. And they say, the difference calculated from fricking New York or London or Sydney, the difference calculated between a hot burn and a wildfire and the cool burns we're making gives you a mathematical carbon credit. The fact it's turning the Kimberleys into a desert, don't worry about that.
What?
It gives you this mathematical driven carbon credit. So suckers come along who need it, like, big oil and gas companies or big retail companies. So they buy these credits and they're fake. They're probably doing more damage to the environment than good. And we calculate that at least 85% of carbon credits are fake.
Wow.
And banks love them because they trade in them. Financial institutions love them because they trade in them. They invented the bloody things. But the oil and gas sector love them because it means they can go net zero barrel of oil. That means they're not changing a thing. They're just going to buy these fake credits. So there's two criminals in the room here with net. One is carbon credits, because they're driven by the financial sector and the oil and gas sector. And the second is this thing called carbon sequestration, i.e. capture the carbon and put it down a hole. Now that's literally an old lie waiting for the next idiot, normally a politician, to come along, how old are you, sir? Oh, well, I'm 40 or 50. Ever heard of carbon sequestration? No, it's a great idea. It's a new idea. It's a new idea. You should get after it. We can still burn oil and gas and we can put all the carbon down the hole. What a great idea. And the politician doesn't say, has it failed before? It doesn't ask that question. Has it failed for 50 freaking years? It doesn't ask, what a great idea. Let's put it down the hole. That's a soundbite for radio. It doesn't work. You see Wheatstone in Western Australia, it doesn't work. Norway, one of the biggest oil and gas producers in the world, it doesn't work. You've got Saudi Arabia saying, we're going to make it work. Well, I've heard we're going to make it work now for 50 freaking years. It's like the tobacco industry, mate. They sold the lie that tobacco doesn't cause cancer for 52 years. So we've just got to get through. There's one way to stop oil and gas carbon emissions, and that's stop burning oil and gas. That's it, period.
So then on the real zero side of things, before we get to what you guys are doing at Fortescue and the tech around making it happen, is it actually possible? Like across all these businesses, you mentioned all the big retailers, aviation, like these large businesses, is real zero actually feasible?
Okay, let's look at the really big businesses, right? Transport, trucks. We have green hydrogen trucks being made now. We have battery electric trucks operating in the Pilbara. We have hydrogen trains. Like these are the biggest trains in the world. Let's not frig around, right? They're 35,000 tons on their back, right? Green ammonia, which is basically a carrier of hydrogen. Green electricity. We have a ship called the Green Pioneer running off green hydrogen. So when people say to me, it can't work, Twiggy, well, Diggo, have you tried? Oh, no, I haven't tried. just says, it can't work. No, I said, mate, honestly, the problem here is that your company can make it work. The problem here is you. You say you can't make it work, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chief Executive of a big company. You're correct. You can't make it work. Now get off the stage and let in some young punk who will make it work. Because the technology's there. Fortescue's proven it. There's technology all over the world. It's getting better. And these muppets say, we're going to wait for it to get better again. Well, that just means do nothing, right? But if you've got a pulley system already invented, use a pulley system. If you've got a wheel already invented, use a wheel. Yeah, the wheel's going to get better. Roller bearings, whatever. But you got the tech right now, so put wheels on your car. Let's go.
Well, let's talk about Fortescue and what you're doing there. Hydrogen is obviously a big part of it, so we'd love to hear where the hydrogen story is at. But then I know there's other technology that you're working on. You bought the battery tech out of that F1 racing team, and there's a bunch of stuff going on at Fortescue Zero. So give us like the high level and then tell us what's really exciting you at the moment.
Okay, so let's start at the high level. So zero, that word you use, Fortescue Zero. Zero just means no burning of fossil fuel. When you use the word net zero or real zero, obviously one is what the hell is net, and the other is, we are all understand what real is. Real is just stopping burning fossil fuel. Now, net says, well, we can use carbon sequestration. By the way, any kind of carbon emissions bad, so you've got to stop eating food. Sorry about that. No breakfast, lunch, or dinner for the rest of your life. So the oil and gas sector conflates food industries, agricultural sectors with oil and gas. It's complete crap. Oil and gas and coal is what's causing global warming. Let's just get rid of that because we can. So we use Fortescue, this massive industrial company. It's the highest by return company in Australia's history. Right, it's the number one company in Australia's history. It started life risky, taking a few bets, fair chunk of debt, which we paid down, and now, we have more cash on the balance sheet than debt, and we pay high dividends, and we're a poster child. So when this huge industrial company called Fortescue says we're going to real zero, we're going to stop burning fossil fuel, big industry doesn't really have a leg to stand on because this company knows business. This company knows industry. This company knows how to cut costs, and you cut costs where you can, and that's your energy costs. So we currently burn, or used to, around 1 billion litres of diesel a year, or equivalent, 1 billion. Now, as that falls, we save hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. When we eliminate it in the next few years with battery electric trucks, hydrogen trains, etc., we'll save around $1 billion a year.
Yeah.
Just because we're not buying that stupid oligarchs, very fastest set pricing fossil fuel, right? And whichever way we cut it, Australia shouldn't have its energy costs pegged to what happens in Russia and Ukraine or Saudi Arabia. That's not our bet. We should make our own energy. Fortescue's proving you can do it. And just a litmus test, who is the lowest cost, most efficient iron ore producer in the world?
Fortescue.
Fortescue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is every iron ore company in the world experiencing accelerating costs? Yes, except one. It's got falling costs, Fortescue. So you got to put that down. There's the litmus test. That's what I want to happen in every home, in every business across Australia.
Yeah. Are the other iron ore producers, are they starting to sniff around? Like if they're seeing rising energy costs and rising overall costs and you guys are saying falling costs, I think you mentioned before we got on mic that you've gone from the third lowest cost producer to the lowest cost producer. Yeah. Like are you starting to get calls from the others?
Yeah, they're good blokes. I mean, they wanted to kill me 2 decades ago. There's every trick in the book to get rid of Fortescue, but now we're there. All right, we're part of the club, so we're mates. And BHP have been a bit slower, but they are now looking really hard at these green trucks. The fact that we're running these massive trucks where the axles start about the ceiling line here, right? These massive trucks, and they're running with zero emissions, okay, and therefore they're not sucking up fossil fuel. Rio Tinto, they're probably the biggest mining company in the world. They're leaning a lot more forward, and we speak to them a lot about it. And they're all watching. If Fortescue goes real zero, i.e. stops burning all fossil fuel this decade, then they're going to save a truckload, according to BHP's and Rio Tinto's shareholders, which are the same as mine. And they're going to say, well, if Fortescue did it, why don't you? And if you say you can't, well, we're going to get in someone who can. Yeah. Okay. So they are paying attention. I think the mining industry, which is meant to be the laggard, the old slow industry of the world, the mining industry could be the first industry to take the world green.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, let's turn to hydrogen beyond what's happening at Fortescue, because it's certainly a topic of interest within the community at Equity Mates and has been for a number of years. Where's your view on it now, 2024? Like there was a lot of noise around it the last sort of 24 months or so. But yeah, what is your view now, and what do you think government needs to be really doing to enable Australian to be that hydrogen superpower?
Okay, so technology is improving all the time, right? I mean, and everything is speeding up. The technology adoption time lag has just gone from 100 years like to years. When there's a new tech. Now, the steam engine got invented about 100 years before it got put into a train, and then it revolutionized transport across the world. All of a sudden, you can move huge amounts of people and stuff because of this thing called a steam engine. Now, roll forward several hundred years, that's now a steam turbine. That's just a steam engine. Now, that technology is incredibly cheap, old tech. But instead of powering it with gas, we should just power it with hydrogen. And you get hydrogen. Hydrogen, by the way, is the most powerful energy in the world by weight. So this glass of water, we can split with electricity and create what we call a industrial hydrogen. It's 95% hydrogen, 5% oxygen. If you can do that without a membrane, which is what all electrolyzers, which is how you make hydrogen, rely on, then it's not going to be pure, right? It'll have an impurity in it. Well, in LNG's case, which is about 95% hydrogen as well, called methane, that has impurities too, but they're not nice impurities. They're ethane and all sorts of other crap. Now, if we make industrial hydrogen, which is without a membrane, we're probably going to start making about 95% hydrogen and 5% oxygen. You're not going to use that to make chemicals from. That's okay. But you can use it to replace gas. And we are just saying, listen, hydrogen just has to have that Australian pluck, that Australian never ever give up determination. And Fortescue, we're making it right now, we're using it right now, and there's some big easy wins for hydrogen before we start using it as something to completely replace burning fossil fuel. And one of the biggest kicks I see coming is that we just Fortescue alone, let alone the country, Fortescue alone ships overseas 200 million tonnes of iron ore a year. That gets reduced down to about 100 million tonnes of green metal, i.e. iron, steel. We can do that with hydrogen in Australia. We have got the radiance or the sunshine. China has an average of, say, 1,200 sun or radiance hours a year. We have an average of 3,600.
Wow.
Right? 3 times. It's like having the coal fields and the iron ore fields all together, but one is sun and the other is iron ore. So it's setting itself up, I think, to be one of the largest, if not the largest industries Australia's ever seen. And it's all made possible by hydrogen. So the first thing we're going to go in very hard at is not just making ammonia for our ships, making ammonia for our trains. We're going to start making hydrogen to strip the impurities like oxygen out of iron ore so we can sell the world green metal, not green iron ore, value added 4 or 5 times.
Wow.
I mean, that's amazing because like green steel and green cement have always been seen as like some of the last and hardest challenges in this climate conversation. And so are you saying that Fortescue's going to try and value add and do green steel in Australia?
Absolutely.
That's cool.
We see our future in the green metal business. Now, when you go steel, I mean, green steel kind of rhymes, but so it's easy to say, but the very hard part, the polluting part, which covers big cities in China and India and across the world with pollution, are the steel mills as they take iron ore to green iron. And then they just slice it up with some chrome or molybdenum or nickel or this or that. There's 14,000 different types of steel, but they're all based on about 98% green iron. And that's the polluting part. And if we can completely remove that polluting part by not burning any coal to make it, by just using hydrogen to strip out the impurities and ship the world metal, then of course we smash pollution and we really ratchet up the value add and the employment here in Australia. And that's what I'm using Fortescue and its happy shareholders to go and do.
Love that. Now, a little bit earlier, you said hydrogen needs a bit of Australian pluck. You've certainly shown some Australian pluck when it comes to hydrogen. You took over all the cabs in London, or a whole bunch of cabs in London, I remember. And then you had that video where you were sort of challenging other business leaders. Who's going to come and join me? Who's going to take this from me? How has this Australian pluck been received on the world stage?
Look, very, very strong. The fossil fuel industry is the largest industry the world has ever seen. So I've got some opposition. But guess who I've got on my side? The world's population. Okay, now the noisy industry of tobacco or fluorocarbons, when the ozone hole opened up over Australia and the fluorocarbon industry, which is making this crappy gas, opened up this hole which was going to bake Australia and everyone else. They're saying, oh, don't worry about that. Look over here. So tobacco, fluorocarbons, chemicals in soil, all these things, the big industry which held them, fought any change. Now, the biggest industry in the world is fighting change, and that's fossil fuel. They're fighting change like crazy, but they're winning a couple of battles and they're losing the war because climate change is continuing to hit. The world is seeing Fortescue, one of the biggest and certainly most successful companies in Australia's history, coming out of the boondocks, coming from nowhere, huge industrial company now, turning fully green, switching off fossil fuel and making a fortune out of it. So they can't deny that. You know, they can deny everything else. They can fool all the people for some of the time, but they're not going to fool all the people all the time. And that's why I'm saying they've won a couple of battles, mate. They've pushed hydrogen back a little, but we are fully committed and we're going to prove it.
Now, Twiggy, one last question on the net zero and real zero, and then we want to turn to just, I guess, business generally to close. But for some people out there, they're not, the chairman of $60 billion industrial companies. And I think there's a general feeling of hopelessness amongst some people when it comes to this issue. Like, what can individual people do when the challenge is so large and there's so many odds stacked against them? So what's your message to people listening who find what you're doing inspiring but don't know how they can participate in the change?
Well, that's a really good question. We haven't had a simple call to call for, right? If you call for net zero 2050, you're really calling for more of the same, and the oil and gas industry is clapping you. Yeah, thanks for backing us in. You don't know you are, but you are, right? If you call for now real zero, we want a country which stops burning fossil fuels. We want our service station to have grids which supply very cheap electricity, which can charge our cars in 30 seconds, not 30 minutes or 4 hours. That technology's there. We charge cars right now in 22 seconds.
Whoa.
And they're the fastest racing cars in the Grand Prix electronic circuit, the fastest. They would come first and second. So I'm not kidding. Right? There's circuits around the world. Fortescue powered drivetrain cars win, and they pull into the pit. They're charged in 22 seconds and they're off. Right? And we have to do that because you change the wheels in 30 seconds. So I've got to refuel inside 30 seconds. So we can send that tech out to the world, and fossil fuel cars will then become just a thing of the past because everyone's going to want cheaper, super fast charging electric cars because they just perform so much better. They're cheaper to run. Now, that's one. But two, you've got, if we call for real zero, you're going to have people saying, well, we've got to always burn fossil fuel. So why is that, mate? Well, just like agriculture's got to burn fossil fuel, we've got to actually stop eating if we're not going to burn fossil fuel. And you say, that's not true either. You can do all the agriculture you want with renewable energy. You can do all the mining you want with renewable energy. You can do all the manufacturing you want with renewable energy. You can run all your energy systems and grids on renewable energy. And when you say, oh, no, you can't, you agree with them and say, you can't. Now get off the stage, mate, and let on someone who will, because the technology's there. So real zero is, don't conflate it with anything. Just stop burning fossil fuel. Australia, stop burning fossil fuel so we can have a much cheaper cost of living and get on with building out our huge industries, which will grow because we've got the lowest cost of energy in the world.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, Twiggy, to close today, you're speaking to an audience of young business and finance, I guess people who are interested in entrepreneurship. So what advice do you have for those that are starting their business career, entrepreneurship journey, and looking at you and having dreams of being as successful?
Okay, so don't think about making a quid. Think about what is needed within your area, within your country, or globally, or just in your backyard. Just start with what is needed. Don't think, can I make a buck yet or anything like that. Go to address a need, okay? And when you identify that, and there's stacks out there, the world needs to change all the time. When you identify a need which can be addressed, then just ask yourself, can you address it commercially? Like, can you then make a profit from it? And if the answer comes back as yes, then pick a team around you which are really positive, which are really determined, which are never, ever give up kind of people. And if you get them around you, then you pin yourself to a dream. You don't waver off that. Okay, there's, when times get tough, and they get tough all the time, right? You'll have a liquidity crisis. You'll wonder how to pay the salaries, etc. Times get tough. It's not when you become successful, when you're rich. I can promise when you become successful is when you handle those tough times. And that's determination. I've seen so many brilliant ideas fail, so many brilliant people fail simply because of lack of that Aussie grit, lack of determination. So it's when you push through those hard times, that's when you become successful. So I'd say A, identify a need. B, once you've identified a need, work out, can you address that need and make a margin? Because that's a good thing. Everyone wants you to win because they want to have that need resolved. And then if you need to employ people, don't employ the smartest, most brilliant nerds. Whatever you do, employ people who are good people. And if you want to know how I did it, there's 10 values. You can look them up at Fortescue. And we just define the characters we need in our people. And it doesn't matter if you're an astronaut or a cleaner on a mine, you got to have those 10 values. It doesn't matter how clever you are, dumb you are. If you live by those 10 values, you're going to be successful at Fortescue. And that's really what's driven us, because it releases the entire workforce. It could be 2 or 3, or in our case, 20,000. It releases the entire workforce to act like they own the business. And that's a great thing.
Well, thank you so much, Twiggy, for sharing your time with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know our audience would have taken so much out of that. And it's been an honor to speak with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Bloody good to see you.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.